I'll resume recording. Bore da. Good afternoon, pnawn da. Diolch I chi am ymuno. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to give a few minutes for everyone to kind of jump in. I can see the attendee list growing there, so we don't start without you. Diolch yn fawr iawn am ymuno hefo ni ar Diwrnod Rhyngwladol y Merched. Thank you so much for joining us on this International Women's Day event. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Olga. We can see that perfect. So we have a lot of talks to you. We've got 8 excellent speakers to speak with you today. Thank you very much for choosing our events, because I know there are a lot of events going on today, so it's good of you to choose us. We've got 8 speakers, as I mentioned to you, who will be speaking today. We've got one practicing sharing their screen at the moment, which is working very well. Thank you, Olga. So we will go through each speaker in turn. Each speaker has a 10-minute slot. In that 10 minutes, they may leave room for questions at the end, they may not. So I want to direct you to the chat function, if I may, please. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a button that says chat. I will type hello into that for everyone to see. If you have a question outside of those 10 minutes, or if you want to share some contact details, or if you think you've made a research link or anything, please feel free to jump into the chat and say, that was great, can we talk a bit more about this, and keep engaging within that chat. I want to reassure you as well, those of you who sometimes message me, we cannot see you. If you're in the audience, we cannot see you, you can see us, but you are safe at home to be in your pajamas or whatever you're doing, no judgment here. You just need to sit back, relax, and enjoy the talks. So that's everything from me. I know you're not here to, I better introduce myself. My name's Emily Roberts from M-SParc, and I'm just the host for today. And I'm looking forward to these 8 fantastic speakers and hearing what they have to say. We've got a great variety of talks today. So as I say, you're not here to listen to me. We will jump straight in with our first speaker, who is Caroline. Caroline is going to give us a 10-minute presentation to start us off. So I will hand straight over to you, Caroline. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. You are on mute.
Okay, there we go. We should be fine now. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the talk. And I just wanted to chat, really. It's informal. Please feel free to ask any questions or anything. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of route that I've taken through my career in STEM. And my STEM subject is, I've got a physics background, but it's all been around the optical systems and optical fabrication route. So you could talk a little bit about the industry and myself a little bit. So it feels very odd talking about myself, but there we go. I'm not used to that, so bear with me. Okay, so, you know, are engineers and scientists born or created? I think there's a bit of both, really. Personally, I always think to myself, do you have a natural curiosity for how things work? Do you wonder, how did somebody figure out that a computer was even possible? Do you switch something on and say, what needed to happen before that came on, or do you just accept it? So, and there's been many female pioneers through the years of STEM subjects, and it's only in recent decades that this has been appreciated and recognised. There's pictures of 8 women there who've really shaped modern science, ranging from pre-war through to the 1980s in these cases here. So astronauts, physicists, radiation, isotopes, all areas of science where women have contributed to what we consider is modern science today. So we've always been here and we've always contributed. So what's changed? I was born in the 1960s. I don't admit that to anybody, really, not very often, but I was born in the 1960s. And I did a quick Google search, as you do, for job adverts in the 1960s. When I was born, this was the expectation of the female career. Yes, there were other options, but generally the careers advice was around nursing, bookkeeping, typing pool. And there wasn't the opportunity or the encouragement for women to be involved in the subjects that we have today. So what does it look like today? Well, today, the difference really is one of opportunity and encouragement. You know, the expectation has gone. You can now you have the opportunity to do what excites you and what interests you, and change convention, you know, opportunity to add a missing dimension to STEM industries, shape the landscape, you know, for people coming behind you as well as ploughing forward, going forward. So really, opportunities are limitless. But as individuals, it's our responsibility to take opportunity when it presents. You know, it's our responsibility to do that. So a little bit about me. As I said, I was born in 1964, which makes me 57 years young, and spent my early years. We moved from Lancashire quite early in my life to North Wales, and you can see a little picture of me there, sat on the horse there. The family had a fairground, and in North Wales, and you know, so I grew up in that environment, that mechanical environment, making things work, fixing things, and I think it fueled my interest from a very early years. So initially educated to O-level in school, left at 16, as all my family had done before me. And I was generally interested in sports, still am, and anything that moved mechanically, and basically I still am. So I haven't changed really, just got grey hair. So I secured a trainee position with Pilkingtons in North Wales. Now the trainee position really was the name that they gave to apprentices that were over 18. So now there's no age limit on being an apprentice these days. So that's another positive aspect of change. And that gave me the opportunity to discover a whole new world that I didn't even know existed. And it was interesting. It fired my imagination. And they also gave me the opportunity to continue my education through BTEC and HNC and ONC, both in physical sciences. And I really developed, looking over there, a passion for the subject. And obviously, having working for an optical systems company, that was where my education was focused during those work-based projects, work-based learning. Now, those opportunities exist today, and you know, through the degree apprenticeship program, you can get a degree and work in the same way. I later completed a physics degree at Liverpool John Moores, and that was a stepping stone really, and a key factor in the career path as it went from there. My career journey is a seriously bad mullet there. I really think you should take note of that at this point, and that's, you know, photographs in the future will come back and haunt you. But I worked on a particular very early stage process of the direct machining of optical components, CNC computer controlled machining. You wouldn't even believe the size and capacity of some of the computers we worked on. 128 kilobyte disks, incredible. But okay, so, and I was just very lucky and took the opportunity that was presented to me to work and push through that process. And it's a very early process. And we eventually, through company purchase, Pilkington was acquired a large American company, so we transferred that out to America. Age 23, I found myself on a plane transferring some technology to America. I didn't even have a degree at that stage, so that was quite, you know, again, opportunity. I was scared. I'll be honest, I was quite scared, but I did it, and it was a fantastic opportunity to an experience. So developed those, and that led on to a career basically around optical fabrication techniques and computer controlled machining, and so modern manufacturing really, but from the early days. So a consultancy designing and developing tests. And then I took the leap into manufacturing. So working for a manufacturing company based in St. Asaph still, and developed a single point diamond turning facility there, which is the first commercial optical manufacturing company that providing that process as a service, and it became the largest in Europe. It was a very exciting growth time because it was a growth of thermal imaging and so lots of interesting materials that the process lent itself to. Moving on a bit into consultancy work, and I worked all over the world, then going into companies again with this helping them develop their processes and products and making sure that they were geared for the next generation, which led me through my own consultancy to work on a project for Bangor University, which is where I am today. That was about 10 years ago now. I joined them as a consultant through Optics Know-How, and to help with a ESO telescope mirror project. And this is how things evolve. They evolve really quite quickly. And that process was to produce, I've got a picture of the telescope on the next slide. So this big telescope here, I don't think you see my cursor, but see the huge telescope in the middle of the screen there. Now that's being built currently in Chile, at the top of a mountain in Chile, and Bangor were part of the development process for the fabrication of that huge mirror. And I was a consultant on developing that process. And I really enjoyed the time on that project and ended out where I am today. So once that project was complete, what do you do with that skill and that technology? And how do we optimize what was done? So we created a commercial group. Remember, I'm from a commercial background, so even universities, we have to make money. It's I think people don't realize that sometimes, but Precision Optical Systems Group was formed from that group, and they today are one of the leading large optics manufacturing facilities, the only one in the UK that can make up to 2 meter size optics. So still a phenomenal progress. And you can see on the right hand side there some of the projects that I've been involved with through my consultancy and previous roles, and that's producing thermal imaging lenses, military applications head-up displays, tank visualizing optics, and the underwater cameras, these big domes here, and the Gwylio telescope here, which is our home design, designed by the Precision Optical Systems Group. So huge variety of products and opportunities that have presented themselves. And then more recently, about 2 years ago, you'll see at the footer of my, just over 2 years ago, we developed the Centre for Photonics Expertise, or CPE. Hazel's joining us today, very much driving that project through Wales. And that is really the opportunity where I saw of the skill that exists in universities to actually be disseminated to companies and help them to develop their projects. So very recently, I was appointed the chair of Professor of Enterprise Engagement and Knowledge Transfer at Bangor University, something I'm very proud of from my apprentice days. So as my title said, this is a very unconventional route, but it doesn't mean that it's the wrong route. Everybody has their own path to follow, and it's about taking opportunities as they present themselves. So a few more pictures. Everybody likes pictures. They don't want to listen to people talking all the time. So this here on the top left is the very first product I was involved in developing. It's actually a bifocal contact lens that was directly machined using single point diamond turning. These were on sale and people wore them, went through clinical trials. And my career path has taken me right the way through to making, if you look towards the right-hand side here, 2 meter size optics, 1.5 meter size optics. So from one extreme to the other, it's utilizing the same process. So my skill set, you could say my career has grown, but so has the things that we've been involved in making through the years. And a lot of that is around the testing. So the skills, what this slide is really to represent is one of opportunities, but also the skills involved. It's not just one discipline. This is a team event that brings products together. You see at the bottom left there, mathematical modeling skills, vacuum technology skills, materials science, metrology, so measurement of surfaces, high-level manufacturing, large scale manufacturing, engineering design, finite element analysis of modeling of things, all to go into this big system or this small system on the right. So just give a flavor of the sorts of jobs. All of those are done by different people, and it comes together as a complete product via a team. So of which we're very proud of. And throughout my career, I've always worked as part of the team, and I very much enjoy doing so, which is why I went as a consultant and then actually enjoyed being back as a team. So that was good. So why should we choose STEM as a career? I'm not going to lecture to you. I'm not a lecturer. So, but it's interesting. It's challenging. You bring another dimension to discussions. Women have a unique way of analysing things, cut to the chase, basically. But and it's an amazing opportunity to contribute to the future world. And STEM brings all of that. Whether you're on the design, the computational, the practical, the mechanical, it doesn't really matter. They all come together. So we need, looking at the picture on the right-hand side there, we're very much underrepresented in STEM, and that the opportunity is there. Okay, the opportunity is there with education, with opportunity. There's a lot more jobs available in STEM than any other discipline, especially at the moment. So the opportunity is there. So be a pioneer, and make your way and support STEM as I have done over the years. And let's turn the tide. Let's turn those statistics. At least let's get a gender balance through the so I'd encourage anybody. It's been a fantastic ride for me. I've loved every minute. I still do. Sounds like I'm finishing. I'm not, but but I have loved every minute. So I highly recommend it. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Caroline, for that. Caroline's kindly left her email address there, so if anyone does have any questions or wants to get in contact with her, feel free to use those. Thank you very much, Caroline. In the interest of time, because I think we're a little bit over now, we have had a question, but it's a really intriguing one, so I'm going to put it into the chat, if that's okay. I'll leave it anonymous, just in case it was intended to be anonymous. But it's a question around career specialists and opportunities in secondary schools. So I put that into the chat, and I think it would be good if we could sort of open a discussion around that as we go. So perfect. Yes, thank you, Caroline. Next speaker is Jan Juan, and we will go over to you now, please, for your talk.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for Caroline's very exciting presentation. And for me, and I think I just talking about my education in STEM subject, so I don't have the any presentation. Just go through and what I go through when I was young. And so all my education was in China. And so as far as I can remember, and I always interested in this STEM subject. And for my parents, and then they never really say which subject are for boys, which subject for girls. So, and from my family side, I don't have any obstacle to working in this STEM subjects. And in my primary school, and I didn't have any problems for my interest in this mathematics. But when I enter high school, and I start to feel the bias about girls, in STEM subject. And somebody start to tell me, girls can't do well in physics. And I just feel very strange about this comment, because I feel really interested in this physics subject. And so I just want to prove they are wrong. And I'm very happy. And I finally prove they are wrong, because I'm on the top in my class in physics. But I sometimes, because this bias, and then I was hurt. And then I remember quite well, and then in one evening, and I was doing my math this homework. And my brother came back from my math teachers. And this math teacher also was my brother's math teacher before. And he likes my brother very much. And then so my brother tell me, my math teacher, and then say, I must be struggle to, to finish this math, this homework. And I was really upset about this comment, my tears just running down, because I feel this question, all this homework, and it was so easy, and why he gave me this comment. And so even in the class, sometimes, some boys not perform well, and then what he said, why you can't do it? Yanhua has done it. And then so in his mind, he always think the girls, it should be not good in the math. And so the reason, and I didn't give up, and then this my interest in STEM subject, and then I think is it can attribute to a slogan. And then moment in China, there was a slogan, and then say, if you learn mathematics, physics, and chemistry well, and then you are not afraid to go to anywhere in the world. So, but I didn't say this phrase, and this slogan definitely is correct, because just a few weeks ago, and I can see someone and start to complain, and it makes some people not interested in STEM subject, but because of this slogan, and then it make people all go to this STEM subject. And then, but for me, and then because I'm interested in this subject, so that's why, and I think it helped me and to choose this physics as my later on studying the major. And so after that, and so when I applied for university, and we have the 10 choice, and then so all these 10 choice, I just select physics. That's my interest. Yeah, and so in the university, and I think just like the normal, because it was a bit odd, and in my years, and then we have the many girls study physics, because the year before we just around the 8 girls and then study physics, but for my years, and then we are 30 girls, and then it was quite surprise to people. And but at the end of the 3rd years, and then I want to further my study, and because in China we have the 4 years the undergraduate study, and then, but we need to prepare this master entrance exam. And so when I prepare this entrance exam, some of my male classmates and came to see me. He said, "You shouldn't apply for master study. As a girl, you just stay there. Otherwise, you can't find a boyfriend." Yeah, and then so I just talked with my brother, and then my brother said, "Just ignore them." And then he said, "They are the person who has no grade." And then so they will say this grade is sour, because this is some kind of the Chinese phrase. They say they are just jealous. So they say, "Oh, this one, because they can't get it," they say it's not good. And so after that, I passed my this master entrance exam, and so I will study my master study. And after I completed, and then I continue and then to study my PhD in physics. Yeah, so from my all this education and later on career, and then so I just would like to talk to girls, just follow your interest, and then you can do as good as a boys in STEM subject or any area. Yeah, that's my talk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting, and I think it was a journey as well that many of us will be familiar with, which is it's still that stigma around people thinking girls can only do certain subjects, and naturally yes, boys are better at other subjects. So it sounds good that your family encouraged you to choose your own career, and I'm glad they did. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker then is Morwenna. So straight over to you, Morwenna, please. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, I'm just sharing my screen. I hope it will get there eventually.
No problem. You can be a bit slow, I think, as well, with a lot of people on it, but
here we are.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, So I'm M-SParc. I work for the Biocomposites Centre in Bangor University. And the talk that I've got for you today is really just a bit of a reflection, I suppose, and hopefully it's got some points that will lead to maybe some encouragement to those who are on the call. I'd also like to thank the various speakers, the ones we've heard so far, and also the ones we're going to hear from later, because I think there's some fantastic stories to share and celebrate today. So this is a reflection on my sort of path into a science career, and possibly if I say I chose to study timber, you might be thinking that's quite an unusual choice for a woman. How do I advance the slide? Where is it? There's a real bad delay on this. Just a second, find that. Okay, so like Caroline, I'm going to get you to imagine where we were in the 1990s. Now, this is the stage that I was sort of choosing my options in school. And I suppose I was already quite interested in environmental issues, whether it was kind of doing beach cleans or kind of finding out about what was happening to the planet. The issues that people thought they were facing in the environment were slightly different than the ones we're used to hearing about today. So you had people very concerned about acid rain. People were thinking about emissions from cars. It was all to do with, you know, whether catalytic converters could be the answer to this kind of thing, and could we use similar things in industry to clean up our act and stuff. And then, you know, tropical deforestation was a hot topic. I know it's continuing to be a hot topic today, but this is one that caught my attention. And it was at that point that I was reading through some prospectuses in the common room in, you know, sixth form, and out of it fell a sort of leaflet, and it just had in big letters at the top, timber. And they'd actually, you know, this is very advanced for word processing, they'd turned the letters round and put some exclamation marks, so it was like the letters were falling over like a tree in the forest. But it actually explains that perhaps to change things, it makes sense not just to say, oh, let's boycott this, or we can do that. You know, you have to actually understand the system and what it is that is driving these issues, or why people are making the choices that they are, that people consider to be good or bad, for example. So this is what led me to register for a course in Bangor University, and it's called Forestry and Forest Products. And I really thought this was the absolute best option, because it gave me everything from land management and ecology through to understanding the material science of wood, and it really got me started. So what I would say is from that point, I mean, it was a brilliant course, but it led me to take an opportunity to study a PhD in natural fibre composites. Now, that's slightly stepping away from timber and land management, totally, but it does have some overlap on it. From there, I took a postdoc looking into wood modification, and then I secured some funding to continue that work and develop the project up. And then I joined the team in the Biocomposites Centre, and there I've been able to work on many projects that are based on bio-based materials and looking at recycling and issues like that. So throughout all of that, there's some twists and turns, and your journey in science possibly will take those as well. But also it's important to keep your sense of focus. And I would say through that process of PhD, postdoc, finding different research posts, there are plenty of different steps. They're all really useful. You're learning new techniques, you're working with different teams in different labs, you're picking up themes in literature and science that you've maybe never considered were going to be important in your field, but you're developing as a person. If you take the leap into industry, you'll also be learning new techniques. You'll be going, oh, I wish I'd paid attention in my second year to the thing about that technique. And you'll be kind of calling your classmates saying, did you remember that? I know you got a better grade than I did in that module, or whatever it is. But you know, we learn so much and then we apply it to different situations. And if you go into R&D, there's a constant process of that. Another aspect is perhaps to join a learned society or get involved in an organization that allows you to develop and to find out what else is happening in your field. So for me, it's the IOM3, the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining. For other people, it might be the Institute of Physics, the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm sure you'll recognize some of those initials there, or possibly ones that I haven't listed, because there are so many for so many different parts of the science world. And conferences and workshops and seminars, you'll continue to be developing your program, which is yours. It's different to other people's. But keeping your focus really is the key. So, you know, through all those different projects, how did they relate to my initial dream of turning things on their head in the forest sector? I mean, some of them were incredibly indirect. I ended up at one point looking at how to make vegetable-based tarmac, essentially, you know, which does sound like it's totally off topic, but actually was using the same chemistry that I'd been thinking about in other contexts. Other things were much more direct and have all woven back in to make much more sense. So one of the important things is you yourself can't solve any of society's problems on your own, but the other bit is none of these big challenges can be solved by a single concept. You have to be looking at multiple different facets, I suppose. Nothing is good and bad, black and white. Single choice is going to turn things around. It has to be steps made in different parts of an industry or different parts of a national strategy in order to change things. So from my degree, I learned, for example, that foresters have loads of information, loads of progress has been made. I've been able to see progress happening. We can see the progress with forest certification. You can see the way that the timber industries use technology and lasers and all sorts of scanning to get better yield from logs. You can see that people have considered the end of life and how to recycle and continue the time period that materials dwell in the environment so that they're storing carbon for longer, for example. But this allows, knowing that other people are solving these challenges, allows me to continue to concentrate on developing my work in the center of it and making sure that meshes in with the big picture. So developing new products from plantation forest timber that's sustainably managed and allowing it to compete, for example, in a market that would usually have been looking to tropical forests. So hopefully taking the pressure off those scarce resources or those fragile ecosystems, or it could be looking at new products from different species or new products from recovered wood, how to increase the residence time in the environment. The other part of it, I suppose, is that you want to develop your team. I've mentioned several times that process of interacting and moving through different places and meeting people and becoming aware of them and their skills. There's also the fact that over time, I've worked with different universities on different projects or different companies on different projects. And my team alongside me in the Biocomposite Centre are fantastic. It's not led by me, it's led by Graham Ormondroyd, but you know, it's a fantastic place to work where we recognise each other's skills. But what I'm really getting at here is that team in the sense of all the people that you know that you can collaborate with in future or have collaborated with in the past, who you can phone up when you hit an issue that it's their area of expertise, or they know what's happening in the market, or they know why certain people do things a certain way. You have different ways of understanding what's happening. There's also the types of collaborations, exchange visits, the importance of maybe sending your student off on short-term visits to a different lab to use some kit you don't have, or welcoming students or researchers into your own. So I've over the years met some wonderful people through that sort of process, and you end up with some great things as a result. Okay. The other thing, I suppose, is keeping up to date and staying aware of the big picture, that you know why you were interested in this topic in the first place, and you know why you're wanting to do something that's going to make a difference. So given that we know that nothing is quite static And, you know, just think back to the catalytic converter and the acid rain in my opening slides. We don't even think about these things now. They're fitted as standard, and people have stopped reporting how much the acid rain is affecting our forests. We do need to consider it in different parts of the world, and it's still an issue. But we know that the challenges we're facing now, like climate change and elevated CO2 and global warming, are perhaps a different part of the challenge. And the challenges that the next generation will face will be a development on that, or a different facet of it. So you need to stay up to date with why people are doing things here and now and what the challenges actually are. And if people are saying, oh, this is the greatest idea that we've had, and this policy is going to achieve such a thing, actually keep an eye to see whether it does what they say, or dig into the statistics and see whether that actually is what's going on. If you're reading the newspaper, find out who it is and why they're saying certain things. There's all that sort of bias to understand, or keeping an eye from the point of view of this industry or that industry. Are they talking about the same thing, or are they coming from crossed purposes? But that sort of thing, talking to people, is essential. So I'd like to, I suppose, just come to an example where I just feel like sometimes you might be the right person in the right place at the right time, and you might be the person who's able to muster or take part in a team that suddenly are given the chance to do something that does address that topic that has been burning at the back of your mind since you started. So in this example, it was a tender specification and it came across my desk, and I thought, well, we can't not go for this, if you know what I mean. So we gathered a really good team. It was very tight. But we also had the right breadth of knowledge, the topics, we had access to the right kinds of data. We used all sorts of things from my side. I was tapping into things I'd learned in my degree, but I was also looking back through my kind of contacts from different networks and industry forums I'd attended maybe 10 years previously, and phoning people up and find, oh, you're working in this organization, great, you know, can we find out the data about this? It really just felt like the different routes and the different ways of connecting were coming back together. My colleagues had got different contacts and different ways of getting different data, or they had different ways of approaching the modeling. And as a result, we really connected this up, and we were able to compile this study, which was looking at how timber was used in construction and whether it was a benefit in terms of embodied carbon, in terms of locking up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in the forest. So we were looking from the whole, from the timber growing in the forest through to in use, but we had to understand the construction sector, the national picture, the different other materials that support the construction industry as well. It was very broad, but I suppose the important thing is amongst all of that, it can be quite a hard work process if you do find yourself in that place, and you may have to dig deep, but also it can be dispiriting or challenging. You may have to really work hard to communicate sometimes with all that complexity, and you can see that, you know, bridging disciplines, you start having issues that are quite complex to communicate, and yet you still need to get the big picture across, but also the reasons that underpin why certain things can't be done as easily as people think. So avoiding misunderstandings, but thinking of ways to communicate to educated non-experts, which is very different to sort of outreach, I suppose, in the most general sense. You need to be very precise and very able to talk. But then the other thing is, having done that work, having presented it, having compiled it, having put it across, there's that weight. And eventually the news or the report or whatever comes out. And in our case, it came out on the same day as some development in the Brexit saga. So you can imagine that after all these months of waiting, actually it was completely upstaged and it didn't really make a ripple at all. So you think, oh, well, you know, we've done our bit. But I'm pleased to say that slowly different people have picked up on different aspects of it. I've seen different parts of the industry take bits of the story forwards. I've seen people want to come at it and do the maths again to see whether they've got their argument. Does it hold water? Can we do this? Can we do that? So you know that eventually something is happening. So don't be disheartened. You know, change can take a while, like we were talking about with these other issues we know from the 90s. Eventually things happen, but it's not solved overnight or by one single study. So that's my encouragement to you. As scientists, we can present the data, we can communicate clearly, but we have to allow the politicians to then work through their processes. So I just put a little bit about myself. There's a reference to the report that I've been talking about there, but also I'd like to mention the current project that I'm working on, which is the Smart Efficient Energy Centre, which is looking at structures, or my part of the project is looking at structures, but other people are looking at other parts of how we can generate energy sustainably and other things like that. So yet again, it's a fantastic way of working together with other scientists. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for speaking. Thank you, Rowena. That was really interesting. And it's generated a lot of discussions as well. So if the panelists want to have a little look in the chat, there's a few questions and a few discussions starting up there. And feel free as an audience member as well, if you can see those, to join in. Some really good talks going on. So Diwrnod, thank you, Rowena. We'll go over next then to our next speaker, who is Jiaxiang, who is going to give us a quick talk. So thank you, Jiaxiang.
Hello, yes. I prepared very simple slides for this. Yes.
Perfect.
Well, yes. Hello, everyone. So actually, I'm so excited to share my experience here and in this special day. And firstly, I would like to talk about myself. I have studied STM for 7 years, 2 years in the high school and 2 years for the undergraduate study, and more than 1 year for PhD program. And currently my PhD program is related to the optical fiber transmission and the signal processing. But I think I'm still at standing at the starting point for STM learning career, and there will be a long way waiting for me. And to be honest, when I was a junior student, I even did not know which major I should choose for postgraduate program. And at the end of the final year, I chose to enroll in PhD program for signal processing. So I continued to studying STM. As for why I make this kind of decision, I think it's because of the individual project in the final year. And at that time, my project is about electronic dispersion compensation, and which encouraged me a lot. And to be honest, when I first received this topic and first received this project, I was very, very nervous. I even did not know how to start with my project. At that time, my supervisor provided me a lot of help, and with his guidance, I could do my project step by step. Finally, I finished my project with the 4 months, which was much earlier than the prescribed time. Of course, during this 4 months, I overcame a lot of the problems and my moods changed dramatically. I remember that I used to have discussion with my supervisor on Tuesday. After some discussion, I might feel very confused and stressful. And after I searched and studied something related, I thought I become a little bit confident to continue my work, and I thought I could do it. But when I try some simulation works or did some experiments in the lab, some strange and wrong result might let me down. I had to keep adjusting my codes and also search some useful articles and to help me find out the correct results. After some attempts, I could provide a relatively reasonable result before next discussion with my supervisor. Actually, each time, this kind of result would give me a sense of achievements, which would support me to go for next week and to continue my study. When I look back this period, I think I paid a lot and gained a lot. And I think I was very lucky and I could finish my work completely and successfully. This individual project actually inspired and encouraged me a lot. And I found that I really enjoyed the happiness after a long time struggling. I think that this kind of happiness is quite different from others. Well, for example, you might feel very happy when you watch some very funny YouTubes, some very funny videos, but this will not last long. But the happiness after you overcome a lot of difficulties, which will last for much longer time and will support you to look forward the next progress in our lives. So that's why I decided to join the PhD program and continue my study in the STM. And from my story, and you can find that I have dramatic emotion changes. Well, I think there are some. So that's why I called it 4 seasons in the mood. I think there are 2 reasons why I will have a mood. Why I will change my mood dramatically. Firstly, it's because we do the research in the STM and study the STM. We can relatively easily judge our results reasonable or judge the way of doing things correct or not. Because we can do some experiments and there are a lot of evaluation standards to help us to judge our results. I think it's one of the important, interesting parts for to study STM and to do the research work in the STM. And apart from this, I'm kind of sensitive, and apart from this, I'm a fresher in doing the research work. So it's not possible to be born with a calm mind. So that's why I will change my emotion dramatically, significantly. But I don't think 4 seasons in the mood is a bad thing, because I think this kind of emotions will make our work more vivid, and you can think that we can live our everyday in a very different way. There are lots of surprise waiting for you. But however, I have to point out that there might be long time stressful when doing the research work, and I think it's unavoidable. And especially when we face some uncontrolled situations, such as lockdown, because of COVID-19, you might find when you don't have some breakthrough for your work, you might feel very stressful, frustrated. And take me as an example, several months ago, I found that I always have negative emotions, and I sometimes need several days to help me get rid of them. So I realized that I have to overcome this problem. Otherwise, I will be stuck in one position for a long time. So what I've done, I tried 3 things. The first is that I would like to talk with my seniors who have lots of experience than me, and they experienced this kind of things before, and they can easily share their stories, and it would be really helpful for me to study and listen from their stories. And besides, they will also provide some professional advice for my work, and they might give me some inspirations for my work. Secondly, I also try to do regular exercise for each week. And I do think exercising can help you a lot. It can really help me keep a clear mind for next day study. And besides, I always keep telling myself that don't overthinking. Just focus on the problem themselves, and regardless, think too much. So we will have bad emotions, of course, and but I don't think we should. But we cannot be stuck in this negative modes for a long time. Finally, I want to say that we definitely will meet a lot of challenges, but we can think this from another angle. There must be a lot of surprise and happiness waiting for us once we overcome this problem and once we found the breakthrough. Yes. So enjoy the 4 seasons in our moods and enjoy the final happiness and looking forward next progress in our life. That's all from my story. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was, I really enjoyed that. I think I can relate. I think many of us can, to that kind of frustration when you're trying to get that breakthrough and then how it feels at the end. So I really appreciate that talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Our next speaker is Olga. So over to you, please, for our next talk. And thank you, Jensen. Perfect. Oh, you are on mute. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Could you see my? Could you see the screen, please?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, fantastic. You could see my pictures then.
Yeah.
Right. So, I will start my presentation actually, and my talk is slightly different from the previous one, and probably it's different from the next one. So anyway, since everyone has his own path, I will have my presentation today about completely different topic, extremophilic microorganisms. So, and firstly, I just would like to say that I'm very glad to be here, and thank you very much for having me. So my name is Olga Golishina, and I'm a reader in environmental microbiology and biotechnology in School of Natural Sciences. And firstly, I will speak about science, and my first slide will be about subjects of my study, which are extremophilic microorganisms. So what is this group? This group of microorganisms, it's a group of absolutely remarkable microorganisms because they are thriving under conditions which are, from human perspectives, are clearly extreme. But extremophiles requires this condition for growth. What kind of conditions it could be? The high or low temperature, very acidic, alkaline, high saline concentrations, or high pressure are examples of such physicochemical conditions of natural environments occupied by these microorganisms. So, importance of study of extremophilic organisms is actually associated with fundamental scientific questions and with its applications. Enzymes from extremophiles have significant impact. Probably the best known example of such a kind of enzymes, especially after this year of pandemic, it's stuck polymerase, isolated from thermophilic Bacterium thermus aquaticus, heavily used in PCR or polymerase chain reaction for the virus detection. So this is about microorganisms, extremophilic ones. And now about myself. I was born in Moscow and graduated from Moscow State Lomonosov University in soil biology. I have a curious nature and actually became very much fascinated about microbial diversity during my study. My master work was the study of nitrifying bacteria, a very important group of microorganisms involved in geochemical cycle of nitrogen. And during my master work, I isolated nitrifying bacteria from permanently frozen lowlands of northern Siberia. So it was the introduction and the very first step into my scientific journey on extremophilic prokaryotic microorganisms. And the master thesis was published as a scientific paper. After the university, I started to work at the Institute of Microbiology in Moscow. where I got very valuable skills during the investigation of acidophilic microorganisms living in environments with low pHs, and involved in important biotechnological application, process of biotechnological application of biology. So then our family, and you could see this arrow which showed you this, our family, my husband, 2 children, and myself moved to Germany, where after some years of career break, I returned to science and completed my PhD at the Karol Wilhelmina Technical University of Braunschweig on acidophilic archaea, and worked at the Helmholtz Center for Infection Research located in Braunschweig too. During this period, I have discovered and studied a new microorganism, archaeon, representing perhaps a relic form of microbial life with unique biochemistry, well adapted to extreme environments. And results of my PhD project and my further work were published in high impact journal. Then 11 years ago, you could see the second arrow, we moved to Bangor, where I started to work at the Bangor University to continue to study diverse extremophilic microorganisms, prokaryotic one, from different aspects. So now I am also a part of the Center for Environmental Biotechnology, which is established on specific areas of research, biotechnology, microbiology, synthetic biology, and biocatalysis, based on study of extremophilic microorganisms. And retrospectively, I could say that during all my time of research career, I was and I am very lucky to work as a member of various multidisciplinary teams with fantastic people from different cultures, scientists from all corners of the Europe and of the globe. And all these years were very fruitful in relation of gaining new skills, knowledge, networking, and international collaboration. And probably all these points are very important for research career. And it brought to my records of authorship of a number of publications in scientific peer-reviewed journals, including journals of Nature Publishing Group, PNAS, and with many of these papers having high citation record. And also my authorship of book chapters and patents. So just to conclude, a career in science offers astonishing, enjoyable, and rewarding opportunities. Happy International Women's Day for all of us, and thank you, and diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Like those inspiring posters at the end there as well. Diolch, Olga. Excellent. Our next speaker then is Natalia, who works with Nodwenna, who we've just heard from. So over to you, Natalia.
Hello, everyone. I'll try to share my screen. So hopefully you can see it.
Perfect.
The only problem is that I don't know how to make it big here.
I think if you go to start slideshow, which is at the
yes,
yeah,
from beginning. Okay.
Perfect.
So my name is Natalia Puniuzzi. I've been working with Bangor University as a KTP associate for 10 months now. And today I'd like to take the opportunity to speak to you about my transition journey from studying physics to material science. So yes, as you can see here, I have downloaded a map of Europe, trying to explain all the journey from Crete, where I was born and studied physics, to Northern Ireland, where I did my Erasmus traineeship and my master's degree, and then finally to England. So starting from the beginning, I was born in Crete. My home city is Heraklion, it's called Heraklion. And So the most important part of my life was that my mom is a maths teacher. So I started learning about STM subjects from quite a young age. And when the time came for me to choose what to study, I knew that I was interested to learn about physical laws. And because I was very fascinated by the new telescope in Chile, the one that Professor Gray, I think, mentioned earlier, I wanted to become an astrophysicist. I thought that this would be my career. I applied for all the physics departments in Greece, but the economical crisis in Greece started in 2010, which was my initial year at the university. And I knew that I would definitely study physics, but I couldn't go to a university away from home. So I had to stay in University of Crete. And I realized that in order to do what I wanted, I had to find a way to move abroad later in life. So I wanted to pursue a career in the subject I loved, but I had to do it slowly and steadily. From what I'm going to talk here, I would like to advise all women and everyone really, to grab any opportunity that university gives you to develop your career. Because what I did, I wouldn't have done it without the university's help and the M-SParc program. So when I entered the university, I loved physics in general, but I found out that I was really enjoying the lab modules. We had 4 different lab modules. I was really good in experiments. I loved being in the lab, doing some practical tests, and I got the highest marks in my class. During the final year of the university, I had to choose what to do in my bachelor thesis. And because I really wanted something practical, I chose some material science subjects and geophysics. So the professor of my geophysics module liked me, and he asked me if I would like to do some seismology and volcanic, my thesis on volcanic seismicity. So I had to move. As you can see here, here is Crete. So my home city is in the middle of Crete, the center. And in order to do my bachelor thesis, I had to move the west part of Crete. I went there, I stayed there for a year. I did my bachelor thesis. And at the same time, I was working as a physics, maths, and chemistry teacher to survive because we had quite financial issues in Greece. So when I finished, I was thinking, I really want to move abroad. I really want to explore any opportunity, to find a way to speak, to do what I love in a different language, to explore what abilities I have. So I applied for the M-SParc program that allows us to work on any subject we want, anywhere, with a small grant. Of course, the money wasn't perfect, but I really liked it. So from the first arrow here, I've numbered it here, 1. I moved to Northern Ireland in 2017. I had contacted with a professor in School of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department at Queen's University of Belfast. He was working with carbon fiber reinforced polymers, and he wanted someone to do some lab technical job in the lab. So I really enjoyed it. I learned about curing processes. I learned about manufacturing processes of different composites and nanocomposites. And my professor, my advisor actually, was really happy with my work performance during this project. And he suggested me of continuing with a master's degree in material science. I grabbed the opportunity. I said, yes, I want to do it. And in 2018, I started my master's degree in material science and engineering at the same university, Queen's University of Belfast. However, when the time came for me to choose what to do for my master's thesis, I changed direction because during the course, we had a module with a very good professor teaching us about biopolymers and how they are able to help the environment, how we can stop using plastics, how we can stop using cleansing films to cover our food and everything. So I was really intrigued by that. And I asked her if I could do my master's thesis with her. She accepted me, and my master's thesis was on water responsive shape memory nanocomposites. So I made this water responsive nanocomposites from cellulose and thermoplastic polyurethane. And after finishing my master's degree, I was looking for a job in my sector, of course. I didn't want to do something else. So for 5 months, I was unemployed in Belfast, waiting for the right opportunity. And I found a job with Bangor University. And I had to move to England, not in North Wales, because the company that I'm working with is based in Gloucestershire. So the second arrow here shows that I went from Northern Ireland to England. So why did I choose from the seismology, from geophysics and studying seismological activity to advanced materials? Because as you can see here in the bottom photo, I was dealing with some MATLAB tools. We were doing all this data analysis. It's mostly statistical analysis that I didn't like it so much because it wasn't something so practical. I wanted to be based in a lab, an actual lab. So when I moved to Belfast, started working in the lab, I used all this instrumentation you see in the upper photo. I learned how to use the autoclave, which is a huge oven with pressure and vacuum, high temperatures. I learned how to use all the different polymeric synthesis tools, characterization techniques. I also used FTIR spectroscopy, ultrasonic baths. I was really fascinated by all that. And I realized that I was doing exactly what I loved. So my work with Bangor University involved a lot of training. Apart from working in the lab, as you can see in these photos, I've also done some management training, project planning. I learned how to use Excel, I'm a very good Excel expert, I think. And from Sandila side, which is the company that I'm based, I had some responsibilities in project management. And the most important thing is that I helped setting up a lab from scratch and setting up a new pilot machine. And from this last year of my work, I realized that not only I enjoy R&D, it challenges me, inspires me. I really enjoy analyzing data and experimenting. But I also like managing a team. I would like to be involved in that. So during our time, our work, we can find different things that we like. It's not only one thing or another, it can be a combination. Here you can see some extra tests that I am doing. So I'm using the tensile test machines. We have a conditioning room. I'm using internal bond strength tests and some water baths. So what I really love is that I'm contributing into science and technology that helps the environment, because this is very important nowadays. I want to explore ways towards more sustainable solutions and fight the climate change as well. And I've succeeded it because I didn't hesitate to move abroad. I didn't hesitate to change directions. What my heart was telling me, I followed it. I followed my instincts, I followed my heart, and I wanted to study material science, not physics anymore. So this is my journey, and I'm really happy to share it with you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Natalia. That was really interesting. And it's good, as you said, to show your passion and your drive, and that's what enabled you to get to where you are today. So I think that was quite inspiring. Thank you very much for that. We are down to our last two speakers, so we will go straight over to Diwrnod, who is our last but one speaker, for her talk, please. Diolch yn fawr, Diwrnod.
Thank you very much, Diolch. Interesting, because I'm actually fascinated by Natalia mentioning her mum, because I'm going to do the same, but all these inspirational women that we have in our lives. So yeah, composter chemistry. Also interesting with Natalia, there's quite a bit of crossover there that why I kind of moved away from physics as well. So the first half of my talk is going to be about how I got to where I am now, and then the second half is what I do and what I'm looking at doing moving forward. So this slide is sort of a journey of my life. So I can really pinpoint where in my life my science capital was built. I grew up with my mother, who was a French teacher, did not have an interest in science, did not have any scientific role models in my life. struggled to believe that a table was built of atoms. But I also had a mother who was very relaxed about gender expectations, and therefore whatever I was interested in was the right thing for me. I was also curious about the natural world. I think about what Caroline was saying about curiosity being a huge part of building scientists, and I spent my evenings reading those. Why is the sky blue? How do clouds form? So from a young age, I was interested in science, despite not having the role models and things. And I did very well at science in primary school. I was getting 100%, and I was really proud of myself, always being put forward as the scientist. And then I hit the teenage years where I did not want to be at the forefront of the class showing them how it's done. I wanted to shrink into the background, especially as a girl. I didn't want to put my hand up. I didn't want to be seen. If I was seen, it was to be cool, not to be putting myself forward. And so my science really was affected by that, probably between year 9 and year 11. And then it got to sixth form, and it's been interesting in the chat looking at the conversations about careers advice. I knew I was good at science and maths, and I knew that I enjoyed them, but I had no idea what a scientist was. And therefore I wanted to have a job that was respected, that was secure, that was doing good in the world. And so I thought I'd be a doctor. I'd be a doctor, which we see many young people aiming to be at the minute. But that required work experience in the hospital. And as I previously mentioned, I didn't have any role models or links in the hospital. And the only work experience I could get was pushing a trolley with the snacks around all the wards on a Sunday. So that's what I did for a year. Unfortunately, that didn't class as clinical experience, and I wasn't given a position at medical school. And that was my first knock. But as Natalia said, it's all about following your heart and flexibility. And actually through clearing, I was invited to Sheffield University to study physics because they didn't have enough girls on the course. And the excitement within my community and the family that I was going to do physics, I hadn't done anything yet, I hadn't done any physics yet, but I was going to be a physicist. And I realized that being a physicist was a very respected role. So I went to university with no idea what I was going to do as a physicist. But I was sure that I would find out during those few years. I'm sure I would meet role models. And I graduated, as the final picture shows, and I hadn't actually met anybody that I thought, this is what I want to do. What I had seen though was this video. It was released by UNESCO and L'Oreal. And it was called Science, It's a Girls Thing. There's a bootleg copy on YouTube because the original was taken down. And the response was discussed amongst the scientific community. How can this be the thing that we're promoting for young people to study science, young girls to study science? You can see a few stills here. Doesn't really appear that there are a lot of girls doing science there. And I was really interested in this. So UNESCO and L'Oreal had spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on this marketing to try and get more girls into science, but the scientific community were horrified by it. So being a scientist, I took it to a load of schools around Yorkshire and showed it to their year 9s, and the girls loved it. So it worked for the girls, but it started a debate in my brain about, should we be promoting things ethically? How do we get the word out to young women without offending women who are currently in the post? So I came back to North Wales and I got a job with a small marketing and PR company who had scientific clients. One of those clients was Anglesey County Council, who were trying to promote their in-vessel composting facility. And I was passionate about it because it was a green initiative and I wanted more people to compost and recycle. And it was interesting, the transferable skills that I could take from my physics degree. So scientific literacy, all the presenting I'd done of work and posters, and I could take the science and make it relatable to my audience. But there were also other topics. So we did a dolphin spotting app. We looked at heating National Trust buildings with tidal wave. We looked at MOD work, so vehicles that carried the road that they needed to drive on top of the vehicle so that they could drive on all terrains. So I was dipping into all sorts of things, composting, physics, app development. And the whole time my physics degree was just carrying me through this, really, really helping me. And working for a small company gave me so many more skills than I believe working for a large company would have done. I got to dip into so many aspects of the company. I was managing a team very early on. I was managing budget very early on. But after a year and a half, I started to think I'd like something new, and I was starting to outgrow that role. And a job came up with the Royal Society of Chemistry, and this is also interesting with what's being discussed in the chat about how women maybe don't put themselves forward as much as men. And I had 90% of the requirements in the job description, and therefore I didn't apply because I only had 90%. That wasn't enough. And my friends were saying, it's chemistry and physics, they overlap. And I was saying, no, I'm a physicist. And bearing in mind, I'd been doing dolphin spotting apps and everything, but I was a physicist. Anyway, I was pushed in the end to apply, and I've been working there for 7 years, and I love the role. And the organisation allowed me to pursue a passion project, which is Trio Sci Cymru, which is based out of Bangor University, part of a £9 million project, which is trying to look into the uptake of local people in Wales to do STEM further on, and what impacts that. Does outreach impact that? Does their family impact that? We've got a wonderful team in North Wales, and it's lovely to be involved with that. But also I've dipped into some consultancy, so I wear lots and lots of hats, and it keeps my job really fresh. I really, really enjoy my work. And looking forward, we are taking scientific methods and applying them to trying to find out why people don't do science as much as they should, STEM in general. So there's an interesting report by Chemistry for All on aspirations, but also we as a team are trawling through an insane amount of data to try and find out what inspires our students to take science further. I'm very passionate about supporting students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and I mean the traditional disadvantaged backgrounds. But if we think back to that first slide about science capital, it's important that areas, especially within North Wales, where we have a little bit less industry and maybe fewer departments within the university, for example, no physics or maths, how do we still ensure that we're giving outreach and role models to our local students? Another question that was in the chat was about work environments and flexible working and positive role models. So how do I support my team to be positive role models inside and outside of work, but also offering flexible work and supporting women to come back part-time, pick up their children at 3 o'clock. How do I keep those strong women in our team? For me personally, I'm on a short-term contract at Bangor, and I finish currently in March next year. So the flexibility continues. As Natalia said again, you follow your heart and projects that excite you. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where this interdisciplinary career takes me. Who knows, I won't, but I might go back to physics, but who knows? So yes, if I can ever help with anything, then my email's there and Emily has my details, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Thanks for that. Excellent. And we are on to last but not least speaker, who is Hazel. And I'll hand straight over to you so that we can finish on time and we don't lose people. So thank you very much, Dylan, and thank you, Hazel.
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen straight away, I hope. Yeah, wow, what a lot of variety from many physics degrees. It's just, hang on, have I shared this? I keep hearing a lot of people saying they've done physics degrees, and just goes to show the sort of variety of ways that people can go through studying physics. So yeah, last talk then. I'm Hazel Hung. So I'm Business Development Manager of the CPE project. And my background is in photonics, to do with light. So photonics is has come such a long way in the last sort of 10, 20 years. If you think about it, light, the photon, is so incredibly integrated into our lives through photonics technology. You know, we can play with and manipulate light in infinite number of ways. You know, we can create artificial light to help us read when it's dark, and we've got screens and cameras on our smartphones, fiber communications giving us the internet, there's robotics and automation in manufacturing. So all of this photonics technology underpinning our daily lives. And that's what I'm really passionate about. And so how did I end up here? How did I end up in the field of photonics? So to do that, we've got to take us all the way back to school. For me, both my parents emigrated from Hong Kong. You know, they worked really hard, frugally, saving money for mine and my sister's education. I was sent to private school, an all-girls school, so there was no distraction from boys then. And maybe that was a good thing in the end, because, you know, there was nothing to say, oh, you know, you can't be interested, you know, girls shouldn't be interested in science and all that kind of thing. So, you know, for me, my path was very simply do your GCSEs, do your A-levels, and then go to university. And that was sort of the done thing. You know, I didn't really know any different, and I just went with the flow. And my choice then was to decide what to study and where at university. And for me, there were three main driving factors that led me to choose a STEM subject, which I've mentioned before is physics. So my family, my teachers, and then core to that is interest and intrigue. My dad is an electrical engineer. My sister also was studying electrical engineering at the time. I didn't really know what electrical engineering was, but what I did know was that I liked science subjects at school. It made sense to me. And I remember my physics teacher demonstrating the principle of the photoelectric effect at school. And he was doing some mad thing where he would jump up and down from a lab bench throwing these balls. And it's just sort of stuck with me to this day. And so learning about these elementary particles was something just so strange and intriguing to me that I just wanted to learn more and study physics at university. But I opted to do a year in industry first, before then at a company called Kinetic, they were DERA at the time. After that, then I went on to study a four-year master's at Imperial College. And actually, that's where I discovered that particle physics wasn't for me after all. You know, it wasn't about cute particles. You know, there was quite a bit of maths involved, and so you know, I still enjoyed the rest of the course. I did some summer placements at Kinetic, and I did a bit of work with lasers and fibers, and that world sort of stuck with me. And graduating from uni, I knew that actually I really wanted to do a PhD and be a doctor. But if anyone calls me doctor today, I sort of cringe, but I really wanted to sort of specialize, do some R&D and specialize in something. So this sort of formed the foundation of this little seedling that started off my career in STEM. And by the way, this bit is extracurricular activity was quite important to me. As I was president of the Origami Society at Imperial College. I started off as the, you know, handing out tea, and I progressed my way up to president, so I'm quite proud of that. But yeah, all the way through this process, there have been these little bugs that have keeping me going or holding me back, and where these feelings of anxiety and self-doubt come from, I don't really know. You know, I know it was from a young age, and from external influences, and maybe partly inherent personality as well. But you know, from what we've heard of today, like Yang Hao saying that you know, proving people wrong, that really resonated with me. You know, being quite small, quite petite, and looking really young when I was in my 20s, people saying, oh, I look like a teenager, that kind of thing really sort of irked me and wanted me to prove people wrong, that I could do this, you know, I could do things and be useful. And also somebody else said today, yeah, don't overthink as well. I think that's one of the things that I'm even now, you know, very, I do overthink a lot, but, you know, gradually over the years, I've built on my self-confidence, I've pushed myself, and I've got a great network of friends and family, and that's really important, I think. And I do carry some of those pests with me today, if you like. They sort of keep me in check though. I think of it as my sort of ecosystem that represents me, keeping with that analogy. But yeah, so my PhD years, this I think marks the start of my career. So before I had a PhD place confirmed, I visited the ORC, the Optoelectronics Research Centre at Southampton University. So I had a PhD interview there, and they had several projects on offer. But there was one that really interested me, and it was to do with shaping mid-infrared laser pulses. You know, I've not really done anything like that before, but just seeing the optical setup, you know, it took up the entire lab, and every element on the bench had an important role to play. And at the heart of this was a thing called an optical parametric oscillator, an OPO, and that converts near infrared light to mid-infrared light. And you had to very carefully align this cavity in order to achieve this mid-infrared light. Now you can't see infrared light by eye, but the crystal within the OPO, it generates this tiny amount of green light. So if you can imagine, I'm sat in this very quiet, darkened lab on my own, you know, squinting, looking for this green light to help me align the cavity. And you know, when you've hit that sweet spot, when the whole cavity just sort of glows with light, it like sings, ah, and all these other colors come shining out, and you can see on this picture here where I've put a prism there to split the light up, and you can see the different colors that are generated. And these colors are just a byproduct of the OPO. What you're after is the mid-infrared, but you know, these pretty colors just sort of kept me going for 4 years in this darkened lab. And then after my PhD, a spin-out company from the ORC was looking for an R&D engineer, and they wanted someone to help them develop an OBO system. So that was pretty much perfect for me. The company called Cohesion had 5 employees, including myself, and for me, being in a startup company it was a great way to get involved in as many different things as possible. So I did start off doing R&D, and then I noticed that the data sheets, they looked a bit plain. So I gave all the data sheets and flyers a consistent branding. I also got involved with sales and was actually quite surprised how much I enjoyed that. I liked the customer facing aspect. So I was able to help advise researchers and academics across the world on what to buy. So everything in this job was fantastic. You know, there was a young dynamic team, a chance to travel to San Francisco and eat sushi. And then some deep-rooted human instinct kicked in, and I was ready to have babies. And so began mum life. I had a beautiful baby boy, which meant much sleep deprivation, but also tea and biscuits and play dates with my mum friends for about 9 months of maternity leave. I went back to work at Cohesion only to discover that I was pregnant with baby number 2. And not only that, my husband had been offered a lectureship position at Swansea University. So bearing in mind I was at Southampton at this time, I didn't have a clue where Swansea was or what Wales was like. And I thought of having to leave my support network of mums behind, or it was just awful. And but you know, we couldn't turn the job down, and we just had to move. And actually it turns out having a small baby and a toddler, it's a really good way to make new friends. And as you can see from this picture, that we do really love it here in Swansea. We're just spoilt for the number of beaches. It's a great place to grow up kids, for kids to grow up, sorry. So yeah, we moved with a 6-week-old baby, and then another year of maternity passed with baby groups and play dates. And then I decided that I really needed to get back to work. And so, yeah, finding a job, I think, was quite tricky. You know, being in a new area, I didn't really understand the sort of landscape here, what opportunities would be available in optics and photonics. But luckily I found this company called Lux CSI near Bridgend, and they were looking for an R&D engineer. So I worked on an Innovate UK grant with them in collaboration with the university and a few other companies as well. So Lux TSI, what they do is standardized testing of LED lighting. And for me, actually, working there was literally a light bulb moment. So everything I knew about light had gone out of the window. So with lasers, which was, you know, well, that was my world, light just always goes in the same direction. It's very well behaved most of the time. But with LEDs in the world of lighting, it just sort of scatters everywhere. And when you're talking about white light, then it's all about perception and how our eyes perceive the light. So this whole link to biology just sort of left me perplexed. But it's actually fascinating to be able to fully appreciate the household LED light bulb. For those of you who don't know, white LEDs are made of a blue LED and then a yellow phosphor on top. So if you look at your smartphone, on the back, you'll see like a little yellow dot where the flashlight is, and that's the yellow phosphor. So you get a blue light and a yellow light, which we perceive as white light, just as you would get white light from a red, green and blue pixels on the display on your phone or your laptop. But unfortunately, my role at Lux TSI came to an end, and I was back job hunting again. And I'd been looking for a job for a good few months, sort of floating around at home, not knowing what to do with myself. And then one day, my friend, who's the CTO of Cohesion, sent me a message, and he told me that he randomly bumped into an old colleague at a conference in Germany, Professor Nigel Kopner at the University of South Wales. And he happened to mention that he was looking for, he had a photonics related role available. So I got in touch and applied. And at first, I wasn't really sure if I could be a business development manager. It's not really a type of role that I'd done before, but it's turned out to be, a pretty much perfect fit for me. I'm using my knowledge of photonics from over 10 years in the photonics industry. I'm pulling on my customer-facing skills from Cohesion, and I did a bit of project management at Lux TSI. And so I've been able to build on those skills as well as, having the privilege of traveling around Wales and seeing this beautiful country, seeing my CP colleagues at the different universities, visiting companies and factories, and just the opportunity to speak to different people from different companies, micro businesses, SMEs, or even funded programs like those that we've heard from today. It's just been, honestly, it's been such an eye-opener for me, and only goes to show what Wales has to offer in innovation across such a broad spectrum of industries. So yeah, I think that's it from me about my career so far as a woman in STEM. Thank you for listening, and if anyone wants to get in touch or connect with me on LinkedIn, then there are my details. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hazel. Excellent talk. Amazing. I've had such a good afternoon. I hope everyone else has as well. But as a host, sometimes I don't always get to engage with the materials. I'm hosting something that I don't, I'm not a part of or I'm not aware of. But even though I didn't understand all of everyone's research, I understood the sentiment behind it, because I think we've all been on very similar journeys to get to where we are now. And that was inspiring, and also was kind of comforting to hear that we're all in the same boat. I hope our audience has felt the same as well. I think we've had really good discussions in the chat, so thank you all for engaging with your questions there, and thank you to our panel for responding. And that's it. All that's left for me to do is thank you, our amazing panelists. So please give yourselves and each other a round of applause. It's been really a fantastic afternoon and really enjoyable as well. We have recorded this session, so if anyone does want to watch back as well, we can share that. And a big thanks to Elaine as well, who has made today's event possible. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Elaine. We hope to see you at one of our future events, and enjoy the rest of your International Women's Day. Diolch yn fawr iawn, bawb. Hwyl. Thank you.